This week, we're taking a closer look at the women who are in the running to possibly become the nation's next vice president. Presumptive Democratic nominee Joe Biden is continuing to vet candidates, and his pick is expected to be announced next week, just days before he's expected to accept the Democratic nomination at the DNC. The former vice president has committed to picking a woman as his running mate. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe to take a look at some of the Veep Stakes candidates. Hi, Ed. All right, so let's start today with Stacey Abrams. Many may remember her from her run for governor of Georgia in 2018. She lost to Republican Brian Kemp. She was also the minority leader of the Georgia House of Representatives for years. She's currently the co-founder of Fair Fight, which is a political action committee for voting rights. So, Ed, what would make Stacey Abrams the right pick for Biden?
Well, if he's very invested in trying to win Georgia and in trying to shore up support among African-American voters, that certainly would be one big reason to do it, two big reasons to do it. She is also, to her credit, I think, one who spoke out quite early and quite often about why she believed she was qualified to do this. You know, we've dwelled, Tanya, a lot on the history of the fact that Biden is only considering women. And she, in many ways, I think, demonstrated how somebody could or should perhaps talk about themselves and why they believe they are qualified, whether people believe them or not. She got a lot of guff in the beginning for suggesting that a former state lawmaker who lost a gubernatorial bid, who has no foreign policy experience, should be considered. But she went out and explained why she thought she should. The other big thing about her, of course, remember, she's also a romance novelist. Writes under a different pen name, but there's something really interesting about her. And if she doesn't get picked this time, there's a very good likelihood she would either be considered for a Biden administration position or might run again for office in Georgia.
Absolutely. There are layers there for sure. All right. So next, Sally Yates. She's a partner at King and Spalding law firm. She's never held elected office, but she was a previous acting U.S. Attorney General. She was also fired by President Trump after she ordered the Justice Department lawyers to stop defending Trump's executive order banning new arrivals to the U.S. from predominantly Muslim countries. So, Ed, what impact could Yates have on the Biden campaign?
Yeah, one of the lesser known and what many believe to be less serious contenders on this list, in that she's not likely to be a finalist. But again, from Georgia. So if he's looking to make a play for the Peach State, there again, you might be able to put her on there. If you're looking for a way to sort of drive home the effects or the legacy, if you will, of the Trump era, you could put somebody like Sally Yates on the ticket to remind folks that this is somebody who stood up to him and was fired by him. But this is another person who very likely could be looking at a potential role in a Biden administration, or may one day be convinced by Democrats to run for office in Georgia herself.
All right, Ed, next up, we're going to take a look at Michelle Lujan Grisham, the governor of New Mexico, elected in 2018, where she was the first Democratic Latina to be elected governor. She also served 3 terms as a U.S. Congresswoman and worked as the New Mexico Department of Aging and Long-Term Services State Cabinet Secretary. So, Ed, what particular strengths could Grisham bring to a Biden ticket?
Well, she's one of the few who has executive experience, in that she's a governor right now and has been dealing every day in recent months, of course, with the pandemic. She is the only Latina who remains on the list. And you point out she's the first Democratic Latina governor of New Mexico. She succeeded another Latina, Republican Susana Martinez. That was the first time in U.S. history that a Latina handed things off to a fellow Latina, even if they were of different parties. So it shows you how immersed in political society, at least in New Mexico, Latinos are. Also, of course, given her congressional experience, does have that ability to balance an understanding of Congress with an understanding of running a state, but she's only been doing it for less than 2 years. So this is another person, again, less serious contender, it's believed, and somebody who could conceivably one day end up in a Biden administration, or perhaps running for Senate, or maybe even herself running for president in the future.
As governors have been known to do. All right, so and finally for today, Gretchen Whitmer. She is the current governor of Michigan. She was previously a state senator and prosecutor. She endorsed Biden back in March and is also a national campaign co-chair. So, Ed, what more should we know about Whitmer and what she could bring to the Biden ticket?
Well, the hope among many Democrats is that she would bring back the Wolverine state. Michigan, of course, went narrowly for Trump 4 years ago, and the hope is that by putting a governor who is more popular than the president on the ticket, she could potentially bring that state back and would be very popular conceivably across many Midwestern states that are similar in nature to Michigan. Another person with executive experience, the governor left on the list that's probably being most seriously considered, and saw her stock rise, especially back in March and April when this pandemic began, and she quickly responded to the situation and has maintained a pretty popular rating back home. Which is a great sign, and in a sign of how popular she was, she of course drew the ire of President Trump and appeared to handle that pretty deftly, which is another reason why Democrats were so eager to see her remain on Biden's list. And we should point out, Biden aides who are close to this process, those that have helped with the vetting, have said that there's a list of about 11 or 12, and that nobody's been knocked off the list just yet. And so this really does remain a mystery to all of us, who exactly he is seriously considering. Who is he interviewing? How is he interviewing them? And then, of course, when and how is that person going to be announced?
All right, Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much for joining us for another deep dive into the Veep stakes. We really appreciate it. And tomorrow we'll talk to you again when we look at 3 more of the women on Joe Biden's reported VP list and what they could bring to the Biden ticket. Thanks, Ed.
Take care.